Lesson 3, we're going to look at absolute values of rational numbers. Absolute values, basically just how far something is from 0. It starts on page 77. We're going to go ahead and skip over to the next page. So example 1, stock prices rise and fall during the year. The table shows the overall change in the price of the company's stock from year to year. During which 2 years was the overall change in the stock price the greatest? So just looking at the numbers here, you guys might have an idea in your mind about which ones had the biggest change. And a change, biggest change, it could mean increasing or decreasing. It could be either way when it just says what's the biggest change. In order to figure this out, one way of doing this is finding the absolute value. So like I said earlier, absolute value is the distance a number is from 0 on a number line. And a thing to remember with this, distance is always positive. Okay? I don't say I'm walking -5 feet. I'm walking 5 feet. I may be walking backward 5 feet, but it's still 5 feet. Okay? So whatever direction we're going, it's always considered positive. Or if we don't move at all, is 0, right? So absolute value of 0 would be 0. When we do absolute value is written by putting these bars around numbers. So we're going to see a lot of bars around numbers in this lesson. So if you look at some examples they've put here, absolute value of -5, and we'll just see it like this basically. Absolute value of -5 is equal to 5. Okay, so when you see the bars, that's saying how far is this from 0? That's all it's saying. Okay? It's just we have to memorize what it means, otherwise it's not that difficult. So absolute value of -5 is 5. In other words, -5 is 5 units away from 0. Make sense? Okay? If we look at the other example they give, absolute value of 5. How far is 5 away from 0? Also 5. They're opposites, right? So they're always going to be the same distance from 0 as each other. Okay? Another example we could look at, just to make sure we got this. This would be absolute value of 4. So how far is 4 away from 0? Would be 4. Absolute value of -17. In other words, how far is -17 away from 0? Would be 17. Okay? So again, it's always going to be a positive number, so you might see the theme here. Basically, the number stays the same, and we just make sure that our answer is positive. Okay, pretty simple, but we got to make sure we remember what's going on. So the book's talking about going back to that example at the top of the page, looking for things with the greatest change. We could find absolute values. Find the absolute values and then look for the ones with the biggest absolute value. You guys can probably think about it as just, which one is furthest from 0 without even doing the absolute values. So you can see that 2013, it went down by 34. That was the greatest change. Absolute value of that is 34, so it's 34 away from 0. And 2014 would be the second greatest change. It changed by 19, so 19 away from 0. And one thing to mention, I kind of mentioned it earlier, but just looking at this, opposite numbers have the same absolute values. They're going to always be the same distance from 0 if they're opposites. So to try it, we have the students in a science class recorded the change in the water level of a local river. During which week did the water level change by the greatest amount? So we could use absolute values to represent the change in the water level. Again, if it doesn't specifically ask you guys to do that, you can probably figure it out without doing that. But we'll go ahead and look at it since they've got it set up for us here. So again, seeing those bars, that means absolute value, which means how far is that away from 0. So on week 1, absolute value of negative 7.5, how far is that from 0? Would be 7.5, so 7.5 inches. Week 2, absolute value of 2 2/10. How far is that from 0? Would be 2 2/10. And week 3, absolute value of negative 4 38/100. How far is that from 0? Would be 4 38/100 inches. Okay, so if we look at these, looking at these, which one was the greatest amount of change then? And that would be week 1. If you just look at your whole number parts, we had a 7 and something, a 2 and something, and a 4 and something. The 7 and something is bigger than the 2 and 4. So we know that's the greatest change. Example 2, they just give us a couple examples here that we can look at. Part A, absolute value of negative 4. They're just showing us here, 4 units away from 0. Absolute value of 0 is 0. If we don't move, then we didn't go anywhere. And absolute value of 3, how far is that from 0? Would be 3. Example 3, negative numbers sometimes represent debts. A debt means you owe money or owe something. So Yasmin is a business owner. The table shows 3 account balances that represent her gallery's debts. Which account has the least balance and which account has the greatest debt? Least balance and greatest debt. We got to watch our wording here. So if we look here, these are our numbers. The book went ahead and put these on a number line so we can kind of visualize what's happening here. And so negative $50.99, that's the least balance since it's the furthest to the left on our number line. And then so that was account B. So account B. And then the greatest debt is owing the most money, which would also be account B. So account B and account B, they're actually, which if you looked at the problems, if you didn't look at it close enough, you might have missed that one. But the least balance, the greatest debt, is actually the same as our least balance for that problem. So to try it, a bank has 2 customers with overdrawn accounts. Overdrawn accounts means that they spent more money than what they have, basically. Which balance is the greater number and which balance is the lesser amount owed? So we got to watch their wording here again. Greatest number, lesser amount owed. We can really go back. We kind of did some of this stuff in the last lesson. So looking at these, thinking about where they would be on a number line. If it's further to the right, it's going to be the greater number. So we could, if you want, put these on a number line just to kind of get an idea where they're at. These are both in the negative, so if we think about 0, I'm going to put that over on the right side because that's a lot bigger than the numbers we're talking about here. So I'm just going to go by 5s here into the negatives. Negative $19.45, negative $19.45. That's almost to negative $20. And then negative $23.76 is between negative 20 and negative 25. So if you think about the greater number is further to the right, then the greater number would be the negative 1945. All right, and then if we look at the lesser amount owed, think about the wording. Lesser amount owed means they do not owe as much money. So actually, even though you look at these questions, you see greater in one, you see lesser in the other question, they both have the same answer as each other. So key concept, again, absolute value, it's how far something is from zero. And we'll know we're doing absolute value when we have bars around a number. So if we look at the do you understand number 2, explain why negative 7 has a greater absolute value than the absolute value of 6. So negative 7 is farther from 0 than 6 is. It's 7 units away. 6 is only 6 units away. We'll look at number 4. Of the 3 elevations, negative 2 feet, negative 12 feet, and 30 feet, which represents the least number? Least number, and then which represents the farthest distance from sea level? So we're assuming above sea level is positive, below sea level is negative, and 0 would be right at sea level. So negative 12 would be the least number. Out of those, it's more negative than any of our other negative numbers. So 30 feet would be the farthest distance from sea level because it's furthest away from 0. Okay, it's our biggest positive number. You know, if we would have had negative 50 feet, that would be further from sea level, but negative 12 was our smallest negative number, so 30 farthest from sea level. So we'll look over at some problems on the do you know how. Just wanting us to find the absolute values here. Again, is how far these are from 0. So these problems, absolute value is always going to be a positive number. So basically, the number is going to stay the same. And then if there was a negative sign there, we're just going to take it off. So these would be the answers as we go through these. So if we look at 15 through 17, use absolute value of each account balance to determine which account has the greater overdrawn amount. Greater overdrawn amount, in other words, they owe more money. Okay, which one owes more money? So for these, just to keep things moving here, I'm going to just circle these, which one owes more. Number 15 would be account B. 16 would be account A. And 17 would be account A. Okay, greater overdrawn amount means they owe more money. We're going to look at number 35 together here on page 81, just to make sure we understand this. They want us to order these numbers from least to greatest. So we can think about, first of all, what the absolute values of these are, and then we can put them in order. When we write our answers, we should put the original numbers, in other words, with the absolute value bars, just like we did in the last lesson. So looking at these absolute values, how far they are from 0, 10, 3, 0, 5 and 25 hundredths. And then we're going to put them in order from least to greatest. So looking at those, the smallest number would be 0. Go back to what it was originally, which was absolute value of 0. Next smallest would be 3, so originally that was absolute value of negative 3. Next smallest would be the 5 and 25 hundredths. Originally was negative, absolute value of negative 5 and 25 hundredths. And then that leaves us with absolute value of 10. So this would be how we want to write our answer for that problem. So this gives you an idea of how to work with absolute values.